Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with an expert today that knows our topic better than anybody. The expert is me, and the topic is ruts. So I know how to get into them, and I know how to get out of them. It has been a lifelong battle for me. And whether the rut is personal, that's usually not my rut. But I can tell you that I've learned that there are times professionally when I am not moving as fast as other times. And I've had to learn some tricks. So I took a lot of notes. Michelle, you're so organized. Do you ever get in a rut?
Oh, good Lord. Yes. And you know when it happens the most? It's so I am very organized. And so I have kind of the structure that I like to live life. Well, sometimes I fall into the trap of what I call autopilot. I'm just stuck in the sameness and not stopping to go, okay, why am I feeling anxious? And that's what requires me to kind of dig deep and figure out like, why am I in this rut? What do I actually want? All the things I know we'll talk about, but absolutely it's the autopilot thing is typically my biggest driver though of the rut.
Well, I realized I had an issue with this many years ago. So let's go to my first life, which is when I was a journalist. And then we will see how it then changed when I became self-employed as an author and motivational speaker. Because how can you be a motivational speaker in a rut, right?
But isn't that why you're a motivational speaker? Isn't the thing you're struggling with always the thing that just shows up that you project to the world too?
No, I think that I try to project positivity and everything, but let's go with the fact that as a journalist, this is the best example of all, because there would be times when I would be nailing it and I would be putting out front page stories every day for months. And then there would be times when I didn't even have it in me to write a 6-inch brief, just a nothing throwaway story. And I mean, there were times when my ruts would last days, weeks, months. Months. And it was not a small problem for me. My first big paper was the newspaper in Jacksonville. And I had this city editor who was he was the Metro editor there. And I always teased him that he was a teddy bear of a guy, but he's a little bit gruff. And he was the first person to get on the computer bandwagon. So I realized this is dating me a bit, but this was at the beginning of the personal computer revolution. And he had at home, I think, a Commodore 64. Now, I know many of our listeners have no idea what I'm even talking about, but he had this thing, and he devised a system where he would rate our stories, and we would get points based on where it appeared, how long the story was, if it was a scoop, like different points. And then at the end of the month, he printed out a list with our ranking, right? From best to worst.
And that's ranking leadership.
Man, and we would be like, we are not manufacturing shoes, which is a true fact, because there were many times when I killed myself to work on a story for months. I might work on one story for months, and then it would get nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, right? I mean, you don't, it's not something that is cut and dried. But Nick, he had his points. We called them the Nicky points. And even though they were ridiculous, we did kind of care about them. And he says, it has nothing to do with your raises. But it kind of did, right? So when I left, I got a page. And a page in a newspaper is when they do a kind of a roast, and they're really funny and they write stories about you. And it's a mock-up of a newspaper page. And the thing he had written was that there were many times when I was at top of the Nikki Point list and many times at the bottom. And it's true. It's true. There are times when I am so on task, and so there are times when I can't do anything and I'm paralyzed. And I did learn a few newspapers down the road that I needed those ruts to recharge for those moments when I had to rise up. And the best example was I was in a terrible rut. And then there was a major news story of killings in the mountains and, dead sheriffs, and get on a plane. And I go from being the worst performer to the best I've ever been, like that. But I really knew that was because I'd been kind of recharging, because you can't always be Hercules. Michelle, thoughts on that?
Well, so there's a couple of things that I just really resonated with me. I loved it's a matter of when you're curious, when you're interested, because when you are interested in something, nothing can stop you, right? And I think a lot of times people find themselves in this rut and they don't realize it's not necessarily even the environment. It's just sometimes you're just bored. You're bored and you're stuck because whatever it is you're working on is not interesting to you.
Okay, so if I'm going to have a confession, I'm kind of in a rut right now. And to my listeners and viewers, this was caused in part by a recent purchase, right? Michelle, what did I recently purchase?
You tell them, give them your laundry.
I got a camping van.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pulled out the atlas and I'm like, okay, where? I looked at the atlas and I thought, I'm going to go away this summer for the whole summer. Where am I going to go? And suddenly I couldn't work because all I could think of was getting in my van with my dog and where I'm going to hike and where I'm going to kayak. And then I wonder, is this the recharging before something even bigger? I don't know.
It will be, because you'll be doing the things you love and you will get energized. And then that's where the creativity happens, because we all know creativity is stagnant whenever you're bored. When you're in a rut, everything just kind of shuts down to exist. So you got to have the shakeups, and your interesting thing is this van, and your interesting plans that you're going to make to do in this van. And think about even our conversations around the podcast. All of a sudden, there's been this whole spark of creativity about how we can use your travels as part of spicing up the podcast, right? So tell me, you're interested. You're interested in this.
So now I have to say that I did really have to get in charge of my ruts once I became self-employed. Mm-hmm. So I quit my job to start working on my first book. This is really going to date me, in 1999. So I've been self-employed for a very long time. And I knew instantly that if I would fall into ruts, I wouldn't have any business. I would not eat. There's a very big difference between slacking off and you're still getting a paycheck and not performing and not getting any money because you're the one who has to drive the business. At a job, you're going to get paid every week. When you're self-employed, you're not if you don't deliver. And so I did have definite strategies to stay on course. There may have been times when I was more active than others. And, thinking about it right now, this is the first time I've really felt like I was like, I just not delivering. So I have to go back to my tried and true methods. And this, okay, also, before we get to the how-to, we have to say that people get into personal ruts as well. And that has not been my issue. Sometimes a relationship rut, yeah, a little bit of that. But I'm a very active person, and I take responsibility for every day of my life, saying, how am I going to make myself engaged and happy today? So every day is a pretty good day for me. But there are a lot of people who do go into deep personal ruts. And so many of the things we're going to discuss here apply whether the issue is your personal life or your professional life. Agreed?
Agreed.
And so whether it is that you're delivering the kind of performance that's going to get you noticed and promoted, or whether you're working out every day, it's kind of the same thing of, how do you deliver when you cannot stay a super performer every minute of your life. And
in every aspect of your life, because I think, right now I'm gonna turn this on you a little bit, Fawn, just even your thing. You're frustrated with being in a rut with your profession, but your personal life and all these other things are very much thriving. So sometimes, you got to be careful. And I say this as just an example to others. Sometimes we're looking for everything to be fabulous all the time. And sometimes you need to give yourself grace and celebrate where you do have those things that are going really well, and recognize that the scale's just tipped in a direction. Just don't let yourself neglect the things like your example of, when to pull yourself up because you got to financially take care of your business. And I think that's just such a great practice that, there's a threshold. And I think that's a lesson that everybody can gain a lot from. Just know where your thresholds are, but don't beat yourself up, friends.
Yeah, honestly.
Because things are just balanced in different directions at any given time.
But my perspective is off because I have a lot of very, very successful friends many of whom have been on this podcast, and these are the super performers. They're the superstars. And they don't think about things like retiring. What? They're just going to reinvent and do something where they can work hard on something else. And I think at the end of the day, like when I die, they will have more money in the bank and I will have lived a better life. Because to me, and this is with what you're saying, is when you take the temperature of how hot you engage with your life, and in the end, who has lived a happier, more fun life?
That's right.
Right. So I don't beat myself up. I don't. But I do value my professional life, and Absolutely. I have to be responsible for it. And so the first thing I have to do when I get in a rut is admit I'm in a rut. I have to say that. I have to say,
and you say that to me, like we talk about this, right? So I validate that this is part of our conversation of like,
yeah,
frustrated, I'm in a rut.
I do. They're not like, this is not as painful of a rut as when I was in newspapers, because, I'd have to go to work every day and sit there and look busy when I wasn't doing anything. And I'd be like making personal phone calls.
Is that whenever you were at the bottom of the Nikki list?
Well, I was gone from that thing. And, I did so well at that newspaper. Nick and I have great love and affection for each other to this day. But, there were just some times I was not delivering. And when you don't deliver, you get on something in a newspaper called the shit list, right? But it was so easy to get off the shit list. If you're not doing anything and then suddenly you put a blockbuster on the front page that every TV station is trying to steal and the other newspaper can't catch up to, and then you're so far ahead and you're just doing, they forget.
Yeah.
They do. But you have to acknowledge the problem. And then for me, the best tool I have is a list. And using the list is different, since this guy that I used to work with at the Miami Herald told me how he made his lists to get out of a rut. And he said he would make a list on everything from the first phone call he'd have to make to start a story and the last thing on the list would be hitting the button to send it to the city desk. And he would just click off everything on that list. And I can't tell you how effective that has been for me to have a very detailed list with small enough steps so I could just do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that works whether you're starting something new, like you're getting a degree, everything's like steps are really important. But climbing out of a rut, I guess the first thing on the list is to make the list. And then you just do it one thing at a time, one little thing at a time, and try to build in little wins so you can feel like you're accomplishing something, right?
I live by the list. Like, I like setting the big goals and then reverse engineering them. And I have to keep something on it all the time. And that's part of my, we're similar this way, but that's part of my, how to mitigate the getting into the rut, is because I know what I'm working toward and I will write the sentence like, at the end of the next 90 days, or at the end of today, or at the end of this week, I will have, and I know what that outcome is. And it can be a baby step, or it can be something big that I've reverse engineered to the baby steps. But if I try to look at the big thing, it's very overwhelming. So I love and practice the advice you just said in terms of just one step forward every single day. You'll be shocked at what's at the end of that.
So in my first book, I interviewed, actually, I think she was in two of my books, General Claudia Kennedy, the first woman 3-star general. And she said that there are certain periods in your life where all you can do is the minimum to keep moving forward. And you accept that. And sometimes you just have to do the minimum. And so that if on that list, there are hard things, you're not going to go for the A+. Sometimes a B is going to be fine, and sometimes a C, just so you can keep movement and have some momentum. And, the idea of getting something done is better than getting it done perfectly. And the other notion, which you and I love so much, is start ugly, just get it moving.
Well, so let's go. I want to play on this one, because this is one I struggle with big time, is the minimum realistic delivery, whatever it is, the quality, just get it done. And I'll share a story. I think I may have shared this before, but in one of my scenarios, I was in a rut. I was frustrated. I had started a new job. I was really frustrated because I wanted everything to be fabulous, right? I wanted this certain standard of how I was going to do work. And I didn't feel like personally I was living up to that. And I was, the company I worked for had assigned me an executive coach, which in itself was a investment they were making, right, on their high potential candidates or employees. And I was talking to my coach, and I'm like, I'd fire me. Like, this is my work quality. Like, I'm frustrated. It's not good. And she's asking these questions because she knows I've been put in this program, and she does this for them. And she's like, okay, wait, Michelle, is your boss happy? And I'm like, yeah, my boss is like actually really happy with everything I'm doing. Are your employees happy? Yeah, we're doing really well. We've had, how about your customers? Are they happy? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, so basically you're not. You're the only one that's not happy. And I went,
wow,
whoa, like that knocked me between the eyes. And that has been something that I have come back to countless times when I start feeling in a rut, because sometimes I'm perceiving a rut because of expectations about, knocking everything out of the park all the time. And I love what you just said, and I didn't want to gloss over it, because this is something I really, really have to remind myself of is, are you the only one that's frustrated or feeling like you're in a rut when everybody else is happy? Because if that's the case, then you had a choice to make. And like she and I talked about, she's like, you're just going to have to decide, Michelle, how can you be happy delivering at the standard that everybody else is happy with?
Oh, yeah.
And then if the answer is, okay, you can, how long can you do that? Is that something you can sustain? Or is that something that there's going to be just because of who you are? And that was a life-changing bit of advice for me. And I maybe that's going to resonate with a few people too, because maybe you're being too hard on yourself in terms of the rut.
I had an editor say that to me once. He says, you doing average work is still better than everyone in here doing it. And I don't mean to insult anybody else who was in that room, but yeah, we are hard on ourselves, aren't we?
Well, we could spend a lot of time unpacking why that is, but that's a different podcast for a different day. But yeah, sometimes we're way too hard on ourselves in terms of what's good, what's acceptable, and looking at how to calibrate your standards against everybody else's level of happy. And then you kind of realize, okay, wait a second, I can take a little bit of a breath and still feel really proud of what I'm doing.
Yeah. Now, whether I was in an office or working at home, it has always been beneficial to me when I get frustrated is to just, go outside, walk around the block. When I was in the paper, I would do the steps. Now I might just jump on my bike or something. Is just, get some fresh air, clear my brain, and then jump back into it, because it ends the negativity. So that's always good. And the other thing being that dovetails with something that is always helpful, which is to get some exercise. And we harp on this all the time on this thing, because you and I both are into exercise. Now, we are not Olympic athletes, people, right? We just like feeling good physically. And when you do move around and get a workout in, your emotions are better and you can deliver better. So exercise is always on the list, no matter what. People, if you hear some noises back there, I don't have gas. My dog is snoring, so I'm sorry. But yeah, so we get exercise, and that increases performance and keeps us in the game.
Well, and I think on that, again, I want to dig into that one too, is I think a lot of people stop themselves because, to your point, they think they have to be the Olympic athlete, that they have to go do the 5K, the 10K, the big deal. But turn on the music between meetings and get up from your desk and dance and do something silly, or bend down and do some stretches. It can take 3 minutes, and just that is enough to work magic. So thank you. So if you're not watching us on YouTube, Fawn's got her hand weight right now. She's lifting, but those are the things that make a big difference. And we sort of devalue the impact that they can have because they don't look and sound sexy. They don't look and sound like a sexy exercise. Like, it's not legit because it's not hard.
And I see people get so wrapped up in their careers, and they think, oh, I'll work out later. First of all, studies show if you don't do it in the morning, you're not going to do it. And second of all, if you put it for a later time in your life, I'm now starting to see people who delayed that and are sick, ailing, debilitated, and dying. I mean, we both know that I've lost a lot of people in the last few weeks that are young. And so we're fighting for our health. We have to look at what causes our ruts. particularly when they are the personal ones, because those are the ones that you have to make decisions on and figure out how you're going to do what you need to do. The step by step, and that's the list, but in the back of my mind, I always hear that voice saying, just take the next step. Just do one more thing to move yourself forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that works definitely professionally, but personally too. It's hard to make change in your life. The personal ruts are the most costly. I mean, far and away. If you're not happy, you need to shake it up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that may entail doing things that are uncomfortable, hurting people that you might care about, setting boundaries that make other people mad. But you matter. You do not need to come last in this life. If you're not your best friend, who is? You have to love yourself the most in order to make those decisions to climb out of the mire. And if something is not working for you, figure out what steps you need to take in order for things to work again. Because you are as entitled to a happy life as I am. And it's always so upsetting when people see my Facebook posts of my adventures and they all say, I'm so jealous. I get depressed when I see your posts. I live vicariously through you. The same opportunity is there for you. Now, a lot of people have real time crunches, but they don't start to break down their week. What is it, 168 hours a week that we have? So it's like, how are you spending your time? And the other thing being that when you are with the wrong person, you know it. You know it. And there is a word that is so powerful and so sad, and it is settling. Sometimes people settle for abusive relationships, but sometimes people just settle for something that isn't right for them. And if that's you, how long are you going to settle? Really? How long are you going to put yourself last? And so you come up with a few goals. Again, you do this professionally, but personally too. Like, come up with some goals of what you want out of your life and what it's going to take to make it happen, right? And then you make your list, and then you start taking action. You have one shot in this life. So, I have lost in the last couple of weeks a friend that was 58, 63, 67, and the other one probably about 61. Okay. Now, if you're in your 20s, that sounds old. But once you get to your mid-50s, you realize it's not old. It's not old at all. Those are young people. And time goes so quickly. And everybody says that, right? But it does. I remember a man telling me that your 40s last 15 minutes. It's true. Michelle, you're in your 50s. How'd that happen?
I know. Well, so I want you to share something that you said to me yesterday, because it fits real well. And it was just a really good question you asked. So let me remind you what it was, because I think you can elaborate on that. So you and I were talking, because I'm dealing with something that's causing me a lot of stress. And everything I stand for is not to be in this situation. Like, I have a choice. I recognize I have a choice. And so I'm trying to justify what I'm doing right now whenever I know it's total crap. But anyway, you said something to me yesterday, and I want you to say it to the audience. It was about the 5-year question. Do you remember what you asked me? Because you said,
I think is in 5 years, are you even going to care that any of this happened?
But you said in 5 years, are you going to be proud that you stuck this situation out? Or are you going to be proud that you said enough and you walked away?
Oh my God, I'm so wise. That is so
true,
though.
God, that like just stopped me in my tracks. And when you said that to me, all the stuff, all the justification going on in my head, that like threw every bit of it out the window. And as you know, as we finished that conversation, you said, so what are you going to do about it tomorrow? And this is tomorrow, right now when we're recording the podcast. And I had said, so I came to you and I'm like, okay, I've done these. I took these actions forward, right? So I took action toward it because that was just a phenomenal question.
Yeah, well,
and so I'll ask the audience again, like, right? When you look back 5 years from now on the thing you're justifying, the rut you're in, the excuses you're given, the not taking action, are you going to be proud and say that was the right decision? Or are you going to be proud because you did something different, even though it might be uncomfortable and hard?
Yeah. And on my last day at the paper in Denver, somebody came up to me and said, wow, you got up over the wall. And I said, yeah, I'm going back to Florida. And she said, I have been miserable here. She said, miserable. She goes, I've been here 25 years and I've been miserable for 20. And I said, do not be here when I come back in a year to visit. But she was.
Wow.
And she was there for 7 more years until the place went out of business. So it did not behoove her that she spent all of her best years and then, left and pretty much unemployable at that age. And that we get so stuck because we think we can't do better, but we can. Right. And then, in your situation, Michelle, you're going to be a whole lot prouder of yourself to realize, you did what you had to do to be on your path. That's hard.
Yeah.
Remember when I had that job for 4 months last year so I could get the insurance?
Yeah.
And when you're off path, it's physically damaging to yourself. And it's not that hard to find another way.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to dance a little fast, and you dance a little faster, and you're not going to have everything figured out. And you might fall flat on your face, right? But you'll get up and figure it out.
Well, even like my situation, it's like, this is in the scheme of things, this is not something, the problem that I'm facing is not something I am highly emotionally invested in. That's what makes it even funnier. It's like, I'm not talking about some like big thing. This is like something stupid that I do not have an emotional attachment to. However, it is controlling and ruling my world right now. And that is where I'm like, really, really, Michelle?
Yeah, I can't wait until we tell this whole story. And clearly we can't at the moment, people, but
it'll come.
There's something you've had in your life, every listener, where it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And just how much of your life are you going to give to something that's the wrong thing? And early on, somebody said to me, don't forget, you're in business for yourself, because I didn't want to leave my job at a certain time of the year because there was a lot going on. You're in business for yourself. And I did stick there because I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. But over the years, I saw that, as much as we are loyal to our companies, they're not really loyal to us.
No, times are so different now.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
and companies don't even really expect it anymore, I don't think.
Well, put yourself first then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The things, God, when I left that job, you remember I gave them 5 weeks of notice because I really didn't.
Told you was nuts.
Oh my! Well, I got talked into it.
Well, no, I mean I appreciated where you were coming from, but it was
spent all that time on me, and And I didn't want to leave them in a lurch. And people never give 5 weeks notice, ever. There's a reason we say 2 weeks. Yeah, that's the number. But what difference does it make? We are in business for ourselves. Our health, our enjoyment of life all matters. It all counts. And if you feel like you're in a rut, you're probably in a rut.
Mm-hmm.
So you take the steps. The other thing, it's like mindfulness is very helpful. When you get a little zen, or when you just decide, oh, I'm just going to pick one thing to work on. But the zen thing is powerful. And the other thing is, if you can take a time out where for a day or 2 days or 3 days, you do nothing.
Yeah.
Then the clarity will come.
Well, I think you're calling out, right? Lifestyle. So your lifestyle listener, our listeners, our friends, can be a big distraction from allowing you to get out of the rut, because you're tired, you're stressed, you're not getting enough, sleep, exercise, you're eating the wrong thing. Like, you are putting yourself in a situation that is ripe for rut. So you got to look at that and then pull out of it to do the things like Fawn's talking about now, of then reflection, mindfulness, taking a break, pause, really digging in to set some of that. So to do that, though, it requires you to say, I got to slow down for a bit. And that can be really hard. But I want to go back and repeat what you just said, Fawn. You are worth it. You are your business. Even if you don't have an LLC legally, you are your business. So how are you treating your business?
I have to tell you, one time I did the most unbelievable self-therapy I ever had in my life. So I went camping at Cumberland Island National Seashore. And it's this beautiful park with live oak trees everywhere and wild horses. It's a 19-mile barrier island in South Georgia. And I made my reservation, and I think it was the second week in May, and I had forgotten that in Georgia, it's already summer by then. I knew in Florida it would be too late, but it was so hot, right? And I mean, it was unthinkably hot. So here's what happened that whole weekend. I had forgotten to bring a book, and there's no cell service and no internet. So all I could do is sit in my chair in this hot campground and sweat. And the whole time I'd think to myself, I need to get some Gatorade. I'm going to get up and I'm going to get some Gatorade in 5 minutes. But it's so hot I couldn't move, right? I'm going to get that Gatorade. Okay, I need to take a shower. Okay, I'm going to take a shower in 15 minutes. No, I'm going to. So all I'm thinking is I'm just sitting there sweating. I'm cooking in this, right? For 3 days. I am miserably hot. I'd get up early and do a hike, but then the rest of the day, I just sat, sweated, and was miserable. And then came that blessed moment when I got to get back on the ferry with my gear and go get in my air-conditioned car. And I had been in a relationship that was not good for me. I wasn't happy. And I was going to solve my problems. I was going to think about it, but I didn't have time to think about it because I was too hot. All I could think of was how hot I was. So I thought of nothing but the fact that it was hot, I needed shower, and I needed Gatorade. That's all I thought of that whole weekend. And I got on the ferry to come back, and I realized I had every answer that I needed, and I had never spent 1 minute thinking about the problem. It was like all I needed was to disengage and let my brain take a break.
Yes.
And then it was like, oh, I'm done. I'm out. Here's how I'm going to do it. And it was a life-changing experience. So maybe I need to go sit in the hot campground.
Maybe you need to do it.
I don't know.
But you won't, because now you've got the van that's AC.
Yeah,
and
it
all
has
the
AC. That's not going to work though. They'll have internet. But I think we do get a lot of clarity when we don't have the distractions of other people, of the internet, of cellular service. If you can just get a time out where your brain can breathe, there is going to be a moment of clarity like you've never experienced. Yeah, I would love.
Why are there so many great ideas that happen like right when you're in the shower or when you're like this is exactly why, because you're present. You're present. Creativity happens in present.
Yeah. So we got to wrap, but people, I'm so glad you were here. If you're in a rut, take action. Michelle, tell what you're working on.
So I am launching, well, let's see, it'll probably be past when we air this, but all my cohorts, I'm like loving that. I've got some corporate workshops I'm doing, personal coaching, lots of things. So you'll have to check out michellebrigman.com and love to, explore if maybe there's some cool work we could do together.
Yeah. And same here, coaching, especially if you want to get out of your rut, if you want to be happier, if you want to figure out your life, go to fawngermer.com, and we will see you next week on the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.